Hi everyone, this is Sunny, and now that I've gone over some of the examples in the houses in the previous videos, in case you haven't watched them, go ahead and click on your specific Saturn placement. There are a few more keynotes, by the way, I'd like to add before I finish my analysis. For instance, Saturn retrograde. If you have Saturn retrograde in your natal chart, you are you are already accustomed to how a slow progression feels like. So the slow development isn't something too different in difficulty, but it can feel either you are being burdened even more by the weight of your by the weight on your shoulders, you're adding to it, or it can feel like it's easier to navigate the transit as you already have built up the tools to understand how Saturn functions altogether, that you feel that there's some amount of weight being lifted off your shoulders as you address the karmas you've been given. That's usually the case, but it's still going to be more or less a slow transit for you, even if it's Saturn retrograde. People sometimes assume that just because it's retrograde, you will have a easier, faster transit, but that's not the case. If it's natally always like that, it's going to be slow. However, like I said earlier, it's not going to be difficult. I mean, it will be. It has its challenges and obstacles, but you are so familiar with the energies that you won't find it too different from what you're already familiar with. It's like having work at your job that you have to kind of like scratch off the down the list of what you need to do before you get to go home and have some time off for yourself. So that's more or less what's going to happen. The idea typically that can also happen is that when you go through your Saturn return, when you already have Saturn retrograde, you can already kind of see some of you might see these faster maybe compared to the others, that you might see the results of the good karma kind of being given to you because you worked so hard for all this time. It's like Saturn kind of gives you the heads up in that space. So that may be a perk for you specifically, those who already purposely work with their Saturn individually, right? But again, only take what resonates. This is only for those who actually do the work, whatever is being given to you, regardless, and you're not actually evading it by being escapist and doing other things or pushing it behind in the back of your mind. Some other things you might notice, I wanted to mention the color palette associated with Saturn are typically hues of blue and black. This can expand to other more darker cool tones, as Saturn tends to kind of encompass that, which makes you seem cold as well as like subtle, right? There's a subtleness to it, and these are colors of powerful colors because they tend to kind of give off this air of regalness and status that it kind of allows you to kind of navigate yourself into a place where you can be respected. Sometimes colors, usually that's why you kind of see people like in power, like in Congress, for example, they tend to wear colors that are not as vibrant, and they tend to be subdued and serious, like blues and blacks and grays and sometimes browns too, which can also, but these are earthy tones. But more or less you get the idea that Saturnian energy is very serious, and when you start using those colors, even if they're light and subtle, like you can start, I'm sorry for the movement, you can start moving them from soft tones to darker tones, and you will see a difference that you kind of started being attracted to these colors naturally anyways, regardless of where your Saturn placement's at. So let's say, for example, if you have Saturn in Aries, you're going to start seeing that if you usually wear bright reds, you start to wear more maroons, like this color, right? I don't even know if you can see it because I usually tend to crop my face out because I don't like being on camera. But you kind of start noticing that, and you kind of start noticing that you kind of get more serious colors, more darker tones. So example, if you have even like the Saturn in Libra, if you usually like to wear florals and soft colors and pastels and pinks, you start wearing even darker tones of that, the more serious tones. It's like not so childish or not so green and fresh. It's like not so youthful. It gives you one like an age. You kind of want to age yourself. So it's not necessarily that it makes you look old, but so more so it matures you to where you want to look, you're attracted to use more of the darker tones of the placements, right? Which I find it kind of fascinating because I myself have found myself in certain Saturn transits being attracted to wearing these colors more often. It just gives me peace and like it just gives me more like I'm grounded. There's a groundingness to it, with the earthiness. And I think it's very fascinating to kind of look at that aspect. And overall, if people start seeing that, it gives off this air that it's kind of like you're a hardworking person. And you might notice that overall with your Saturn placements, as well as what I wanted to lastly add, which I found it very interesting. But more so, I can also even say that you might even present yourself a little bit more colder overall. All of these placements kind of give you like an iciness to you, like a very self-protective preservation attitude towards many things, and you would find it helpful overall to kind of encapsulate these, because there's a lot of work that Saturn gives you. So if you are not prepared mentally, emotionally, it kind of messes with that sphere outside externally, which Saturn kind of likes to work with. So that iciness might be temporary, or might just add to the maturity of your persona. It's very natural for people to see, like, majority of the people that you end up communicating with, you tend to see them that once they're mature, they're a lot more serious, or they're more quiet, reserved. They won't give their opinion so freely, only when it's necessary. It's options like that. Or at least when you do speak, if you do speak naturally a lot, it tends to kind of be with a purpose, and without an invitation for critique, right? So it more so gives you this air of someone that's being intellectually mature. I really like that aspect of Saturn, that also allows you to kind of grow. But again, these are slow progressions. You won't see that right away, but you might see that in the slow progression of your transit, or the transit thereafter, because sometimes Saturn, just because you go over this placement doesn't mean you automatically get the results right away. It's a slow planet of results. So within the age of 30 and on, you might see some positive aspects, but you won't feel it until later on, after your 30s and 40s, because it won't hit you right away. It's something about Saturn that makes you feel like, I went through so many hardships, and it's hard to believe that I got here, but I'm here, but I'm not enjoying myself just yet. It's like you kind of catch up slowly to kind of feel happy and ecstatic and full. Like, everybody knows it's Saturnian energy, and Saturn people that are Saturn ruled, not just Capricorns and Aquarius, but more so Saturnian energy people, or strong chart in their chart, they tend to kind of feel like a lot more childish and more free, and when they're older, because they've already worked with all the hardships in their life, so they kind of just let go and they have fun. So obviously it takes many years for you to see those kinds of progressions. It's not something you're going to see right away, so I would like that for you guys to keep that in mind. So don't take it too hard if you don't see things right away, as it usually kind of takes some time to show up in that aspect. And you might also have a preference for colder climates. There's something about you that might be attracted to kind of colder environments, or that cold air, or that extreme heat, depending sometimes. But it's just that extreme weather of like isolation that you just feel very comfortable in. It's like you can work. It's like your mind clears off, and you can kind of have tunnel vision, or that focus of like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on this, and I'm not gonna get distracted. So that's something interesting you should kind of note, like within your journey. It's like you kind of just distance yourself from the BS, or the things that just don't really matter. You start to prioritize and be practical and pragmatic over things that really get to your soul and your essence, and what you really need in your day-to-day life. It's like you kind of step up to the not ladder, but yeah, I guess that's a good way of saying it. You step up to the ladder of what's really necessary to do. And you might also find yourself that you elevate yourself, and you kind of give off this air that not that you're above people, but you kind of slowly start to put yourself in that pedestal. In case of those people who are not near you, who haven't had their return, you kind of notice the difference in their air. It's like this, I keep thinking of that Pride and Prejudice scene where the women are walking around the men with Mr. Darcy and his friend, I forgot his name, Mr. something, and there's like, they're describing the perfect woman and stuff like that. So that's what they do. It's just kind of like you slowly engulf this energy of maturity and regalness and status. And you should remember that things don't always get better, but Saturn always wants you to step up to the plate. And you step up to the plate, great rewards, physical rewards typically are given, not just internal, although I kind of associate internal rewards more so like psychologically with like Pluto, for example. But again, the generational planets are very interesting to work with, and I think they're a good learning experience, but they're slow learning experiences that are gonna get you, and they're gonna get you good. They're not gonna let you progress right away. It's like something that you kind of have to figure out, and the way you figure it out is by kind of doing the hard work of like, okay, this is where I keep doing this repetitive karmic cycle. I keep repeating and repeating and repeating. Where am I messing up? Why can't I do a different? Why can't I get a different result when I'm doing the same thing? So it's gonna kind of allow you to kind of navigate slowly and like diverge from the typical plan, even though it's still structural within its archetypal kind of aspect. And you're gonna kind of know how to navigate this by giving yourself your own sense of direction and your own authority. So, welcome to turn in energy. Don't be scared of it. Saturn returns can be very productive. It's just like having a day-to-day job where you have a lot of responsibilities and you have to kind of go down the list of scratching off things you need to do, and then finally going home, like I said earlier. So welcome it, embrace it, enjoy it, learn from it, and you will eventually learn to adapt and appreciate what Saturn brought you within that time. Sometimes people just get married. That's the only difference. Like, there's so many just changes that kind of are given, but people never see that because there's a lot of fear mongering and it's unhealthy. So bye bye, everybody.